Well, we are seeing a dangerous escalation in the Russia-Ukraine war with a fire breaking out at a Russian-controlled nuclear plant. It happened on Sunday in a cooling tower at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. This plant is in southern Ukraine, and at this point, there has been no detected spike in radiation levels reported. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky blaming Russian forces for starting the fire. And for the first time, he is also acknowledging Ukraine's one-week-long offensive into the Kursk region of Russia.
Only from the beginning of this summer and only from the Kursk region, our Sumy region suffered almost 2,000 strikes, artillery, mortars, drones. We also monitor every missile strike, and each such strike deserves a fair response.
And joining us now is CNN senior international correspondent Fred Pleitgen, who is live for us in Berlin. Fred, for the last week or so, this operation had been shrouded in mystery and still remains unclear. I mean, what do we know about where this appears to be heading?
Well, right now it certainly appears to be heading in a direction where the Ukrainians are still trying to make gains. They're still sweeping through that area in the sort of southwestern region of Russia. Some of it is in the Kursk region and some of it is in the Belgorod regions of Russia. And they're trying to take some of those small little villages that are right on the border with Ukraine. Nevertheless, having said that, it appears as though the Ukrainians have managed to get around 30 kilometers into Russian territory. And some of the numbers, Rahel, that we're getting, and these are numbers that have been confirmed by the Russians, are actually quite staggering. Some of Vladimir Putin's closest advisors have told him that 28 villages at least are now under Ukrainian control, and some 120,000 Russians have had to leave their homes and be evacuated. 180,000 are under evacuation orders, and that is in the Kursk region alone. Again, in the Belgorod region, you also have some people evacuating as well. So certainly this seems to be a pretty big problem for the Russians and a big problem for them to also try and hold up the Ukrainians. And as you can imagine, Rahel, Vladimir Putin absolutely angry at this situation. He had a meeting with those advisors earlier today where he lashed out at the Ukrainians, lashed out also at Ukraine's Western allies, saying there will be a response by the Russians. I want to listen into some of the other things that he had to say there.
It appears that the enemy, with the help of the Western masters, is fulfilling their will, and the West is fighting us with the hands of the Ukrainians. So looks like the enemy seeks to improve its negotiating positions in the future.
So he's speaking there about Ukraine trying to improve its negotiating position, as he put it, obviously meaning that if there are ever peace talks between Ukraine and Russia. But one of the things it appears as though the Ukrainians are trying to achieve is not just hold this territory, but they've been under a lot of pressure by a massive Russian force in the east of Ukraine that's sort of been inching forward, even though the Russians have suffered some pretty big losses as well. And the Ukrainians are hoping that the Russians are going to have to divert some of those forces that are pressing against Ukraine's troops and divert them to those areas of Russia's that the Ukrainians have now invaded. Whether or not that's going to work is still not clear. There are signs that it is already happening, however. Nevertheless, this continues to be, by all indications, a fairly successful operations by a small but very agile Ukrainian force there, Rahel.
Fascinating. Fred, what about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant? I mean, what more can you share with us there, and how worried should we be?
Well, I think pretty worried. I mean, this is the biggest nuclear power plant in all of Europe, with some 6 nuclear reactors. And some of the video that we've seen from that area, I've been at that vantage point where you overlook the cooling towers of that power plant with that thick smoke billowing out of one of them. That certainly in itself appears to be a pretty worrying sign as well. And we know that that power plant is essentially on the front line between the Russians and the Ukrainians. It is, of course, in Russian-controlled territory, though. The Ukrainians are saying that they believe that the Russians started the fire, possibly by burning some tires. The Russians themselves are saying that it was a Ukrainian drone attack that targeted that nuclear power plant. It's interesting because the International Atomic Energy Agency, because this is such a worrying situation and has been for an extended period of time, they have some observers inside that power plant, and those observers say that they had only been told by workers at the plant that some sort of explosion had occurred. They also spoke about a drone attack, but these are also workers that, of course, are employed by Russia's nuclear energy companies. So really unclear what's going on there. I think one of the most important things that we've heard, and you already mentioned this, is that there has been no spike in radiation just yet. But this really is another in a string of very worrying events that has happened at that nuclear power plant, which again is right on the sort of front line between Russia and Ukraine's forces.
Yeah, certainly something to watch. Keep us posted. Fred Pleitgen, live for us there in Berlin. Fred, thank you.
CNN Global Affairs analyst Kimberly Dozier is back with us right now. Kim, Ukrainian soldiers, they're now fighting inside of Russia. How significant is this?
Well, this has been a major shot in the arm for morale inside Ukraine, because you remember that for months it's been pretty much a stalemate, with Russia slowly gaining ground in the east of the country. Now that the Ukrainian forces have done this daring raid into part of Russia, into the Kursk region, they have captured the headlines inside Moscow. What's not clear, though, is how long are they going to stay? It's an estimated, say, 5,000 to 10,000 troops in there. That is not enough to hold that territory, but it could be enough to draw some of the top Russian troops away from the east of the country to try to push them out. That alone could give other Ukrainian troops a bit of relief, but most of all, sends a message to the West: we're not out of this fight.
On the face of this, Kim, it might look like a significant gain, potentially a military gain for Ukraine, but do you think it could also come with some significant potential risks?
Well, certainly, as thinly stretched as the Russian forces apparently are along their eastern flank, they're entrenched in there, and they're going to have to pull some troops out to push this this incursion out of Kursk. But that also means that Ukrainian troops are thinly spread. And so those 5,000 to 10,000 troops that we believe are inside Kursk had to come from somewhere, plus all the supplies to keep them there. The longer this goes on, it could be taking resources from other parts of the battlefield. But at the same time, the one note sort of scream in the West was, you guys are losing, you're losing. And from President Zelensky's point of view, countries that decide something that they're spending money on is not worth the time or the cost, they start to pull away. That's the vice president candidate J.D. Vance's point of view. And that's something that Ukraine can't afford. So this changes the channel.
Kim, I want to also ask you about these latest videos that we're now seeing, videos on social media showing Ukrainian soldiers ripping down Russian flags and raising their flags inside Russian territories. What do you make of that?
Again, this is more about messaging. This is more about boosting morale inside the country, where Ukrainians have been hammered daily by Russian airstrikes. And also those strikes have hit a lot of infrastructure. So sometimes the capital, Kyiv, is without power for 12 or more hours a day. Seeing Ukrainian troops pulling down Russian flags is just a boost for everyone, especially coming as we are into winter, when it's going to be a lot colder and a lot tougher without that power supply.
We'll see how this escalates and how this develops. It's a very, very significant development right now. Kimberly Dozier, thank you very much for your excellent analysis.